Greetings. Greetings and welcome back to the channel. If for the first time you're coming across my channel, please remember to subscribe. Thank you. Now that you have subscribed, I want to talk about Marcus Garvey today. He's recently, as I said in the first video, I've come across the news of the pardon that he's received. But this pardon is something that's been that many people have been trying to get for a long time, from the days of from the days of Obama. His son was trying and others, the Rastafari community and others one of his son was trying to get a pardon from Obama. So they had made up a petition online and trying to get the numbers together to get this pardon. So it's been a long time. So we want to bring you a video of him breaking certain things down. You know, they persecute Marcus Garvey and send him to jail and deport him innocently for things he didn't know about, because according to certain things, J. Edgar Hoover, according to what I heard that he said, even with Malcolm X, he didn't want someone that is gonna be a black Moses. You understand me? And something like that. And he didn't want us as a people, even though they didn't want us there, they also do not want us as a people to return, to go back home to Africa. You know, so some of the things he's gonna talk about, it's no sense me giving you the whole thing here. So I would prefer first if we go and watch the video and stay till the end, and let's come back and have a small discussion at the end. Thank you.
Well, I'm the second son of Marcus Garvey. I have an older brother. He's Marcus Jr. I was born in Jamaica, went to school there, went to college in Canada at McGill University, and then did most of my surgical training here in the United States. And I'm a cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon. You know that a lot of us don't know our own history. As my dad said, a people without a knowledge of their origins, history, and culture is like a tree without roots. And I think that's one of the problems in our African communities, is that we're not taught our history. We're taught a curriculum that doesn't value us and doesn't value our historic contributions to civilization over time. So, you know, my dad came to this country in 1916 after traveling the world over and after reading Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery. And he thought that the Tuskegee Institute was a great model to be able to rebuild African civilization and African communities. Because at that time, 1914, as you know, in terms of worldwide, this was in the middle of colonialism and obviously post-slavery. And there was coming up from the South at that time about 2 million blacks who were previously agricultural coming into the urban environment to find jobs. And again, this was the 1914-18 war with soldiers coming back. So there was a whole lot of ferment in the air about democracy and freedom. My father came into that milieu and articulated a message of self-sufficiency and looking back to the continent of Africa in terms of our beliefs, in terms of our culture, and trying to unite us as a people. In those days, he used to talk about 400 million black people. Now, of course, we are 1.2 billion, and we're numerically the third largest racial group. So still, the idea is to unite us as a people, because that gives us strength in numbers. And of course, the African continent is the richest continent in the world. So we need to be able to control that, to be able to maximize who we are as a people. So this was his message. And of course, you know, a message like that ran counter to the doctrine of white supremacy. And of course, that was exemplified by J. Edgar Hoover, who felt that, you know, white supremacy and its institutionalization within the American systems, you know, in terms of voting rights and civil rights, etc., that was the norm. Whereas my father said, no, we require respect. And you had mentioned a little bit earlier about the red, black, and green. Well, he had the first international convention of African people in 1920. And with marching going from Harlem, 135th Street, down to Madison Square Gardens, filling Madison Square Garden, 25,000 people with overflow, and having thousands upon thousands of delegates coming in from all over the world, including African countries. And that was the first international convention of African people. And out of that came the Declaration of the Rights of Negro Peoples of the World. And out of that came a flag and a national anthem for Black people. Because one of the things that people in the South used to say, oh, the coon is nobody, he has no flag, he has no nation. So, the UNIA, the organization, nominated my father as, quote, President General of Africa, and came up with the red, black, and green, which is symbolic, the red standing for the blood of our ancestors that's been shed in order to establish our civilization and during the hard times. The black is for phenotypical appearance, we're post-black people in that sense, and green is for the riches, both agricultural and otherwise. So that's the symbolism of the red, black, and green. In order to build community, then you have to unite within your community and build that, so that the jobs are in the community, the businesses support the community supports the business. That's how you become self-sufficient. And every ethnic group has used their unity as a group to advance within the American economic scheme. And you can look at it, the Irish did that, the Jewish people did that, the Chinese people did that, now the Koreans have done that, the Indians are doing that. Now, we neglected the message of Marcus Garvey, and part of that, of course, is due to the harassment of somebody like J. Edgar Hoover, and the fact that he was able to derail the movement because of the false charges, et cetera, et cetera. So we ended up with, of course, this misunderstanding of integration. There's nothing wrong with integration, but integration really means desegregation. It doesn't mean you depend on somebody else for your sustenance. You understand? So yes, we can sit at the table, but we have to bring our own knife and fork, and even bring our own meal when we sit at the table with somebody else. We have to come there with something. And there's something that we have is our community strength, which is our dollars, and which is our voting, and which is our belief system in terms of who we are and our history as a people. We have the longest history in the world because we were the first people ever. 200,000 years ago, that's where people started, Homo sapiens sapiens. That's us. So we have the oldest history, the longest history, and the longest in terms of civilization. So nobody can teach us. But we need to know our own history, and that was the basis of a lot of what he said. We are the only ones that were enslaved, that came here and were enslaved. And along with the enslavement, a mentality had to have been developed. Because in order to identify a human being as a commodity, you have to dehumanize them, and you have to demonize them. You have to say they're nothing, there were cannibals in the country where they came from, what we're doing for them in terms of enslaving them is a wonderful thing for them, etc., etc. And you build on that. You destroy their history. The books have been burned all the way from the Romans, have been burning our books in Egypt and in Alexandria. They burned the books in North Africa, they burned the books in Spain. So our books have been burned over and over, and then the history has been rewritten. So they've had the ability to rewrite our history because they've destroyed our books and they've co-opted our universities and our brightest minds. So now our PhDs are all indoctrinated in this system that says that we're inferior and we have no history. So in order to continue that and not look at the damage that has been done, then you have to continue more or less to beat us down as a people, where everybody else has been able to use their own strength as a community to offset what's called whiteness. Obviously, Chinese are not white, Indians are not white, Koreans are not white per se, but sooner or later, everybody gets an honorary white status in terms of the black community. And then, of course, the other thing, and we have to be honest about that, we've had dissension within our community, so that we have not been able to unify as we should have been able to unify. And this is one of our weaknesses. You see, but when it comes to us, there is always the attempt to break us up and individualize us. Well, you're not like them. Come and join our group. So again, it's an attack on our group solidarity, and it happens over and over again. And whenever a leader gets up that is strong enough to gather a large support behind them, you'll find that something happens to that leader. In terms of Marcus Garvey, they were able to falsify charges and then deport him because he was an immigrant and he could not get citizen status, although he tried. In terms of Malcolm X, he was shot. In terms of Martin Luther King, he was shot. And you can go down the line, whether you want the Panthers or whatever it is. Or even now, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, somebody else jumps up and says Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter. I mean, the point is that, if right now it's Black lives that are under attack. So the correct response would be, gee, I understand where you're coming from. And we see those horrible videos and we empathize. But very often we get the opposite, as if to say we shouldn't even raise our voices in protest. So it's really a continued attempt to keep us in a dependent status and to neutralize any voice or any action that would move us away from that. But you see, again, it's, we've drunk too deep at the well of individualism, which is what is preached by the majority group. But when you look at it, they didn't get where they are by individualism. They got where they are by group conquest and force of arms. It wasn't individuals going out there and saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. You see, this whole business of individual accomplishment is a myth. You see, first of all, the land was taken away from the Native American. How did that happen? It wasn't individuals going out there and saying, well, I'm going to farm this little piece of land. No, the army went out there, wiped out the Indians in a particular area, and then said, okay, you guys, come on in. You see, and then 100,000 came, or 1 million came, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, in order to move forward, you really have to take advantage of your group strength. Individualism, as it is portrayed within the white communities after they have captured the wealth and now they're sharing it up among individuals. So we don't understand that. We think individualism is the way to go to get over. You see, and then one guy walks through the door and they say, come on in. But then they close the door behind the one guy. You see, and they say, well, look, because this allows the white liberals to say, well, look at this guy. He's up there on TV as a show or whatever it is. He could succeed. Why couldn't everybody else succeed? Well, the door is closed for everybody else, you see. And then some other guy comes and he knocks hard enough and another one guy gets in. You see, so that, how should I say, sets the stage for the individual who is looking for a way to get over.
Correct.
And you will sell out this community. When you get right down to it, individualism is greed, and you'll sell anybody. Because when you look at it, you have to look at it from the perspective of world domination. You see, what Marcus Garvey wanted is for us over here, who had been exposed to certain techniques and technology and so on, in terms of industrialization, because that's where we were at the beginning of the 20th century. We were industrializing. And he wanted those of us who have the abilities and the wherewithal in terms of building industries and participating in industrial development to have a space in Africa to do that, to build nations in Africa. He wasn't looking to bring the hoi polloi over there. It was a matter of development. Now, when you look at that, and this was where he was frustrated, for example, in Liberia, you see the same land that when he sent his agents over there was promised to him by President King, who was the president of Liberia at that time. Okay, once the government agents from the United States went over there and spoke to King, King had already written an agreement with the UNIA that they would have this land for development. They could bring their equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so more $250,000 worth of equipment went. It was sitting on the wall. Okay, agents got there, and then King changed his mind. Not only did he change his mind, but the same land that was promised to the UNIA, my dad's organization, went to Firestone for rubber, because this was a hot commodity at that time in the war, for rubber tires. So we sold, meaning Liberia, the President King and his acolytes sold Liberia to Firestone, when Garvey was bringing blacks there to develop Liberia as a free country. And that would be the base in Africa. So you see, these people are not that crazy. By that I mean that they will frustrate our development here in the United States. but they also frustrate the development in Africa. As you can see, that is what is happening in all the different African countries. There was a coup against Kwame Nkrumah. Patrice Lumumba was killed. They've demonized Mugabe. Any black leader who stands up in Africa against a Europe and American policy, pretty soon there's a coup against them. And if they're not assassinated, they're voted out of office, etc., etc. And pretty soon they come up on charges, etc., etc. So it's a worldwide system. It's not a national system. And it has to be seen from that perspective. It's world domination. That's what globalization is. It's world domination by a capitalist economy that, skews wealth so that you have an elite corporate structure at the top and the rest of us are being pauperized. There's definitely a change. But I think that the system that has been set up by white supremacy is extremely strong. It's the globalized economic system. And it has such a stranglehold on the countries of the world. Everybody ends up subscribing to it, even those countries that you have talked about, for example, China. China is part of the G7 or the top 8 industrialized countries, so is Japan, etc. You see, so everybody participates to some degree. So I agree with what you say, that the tide is turning, but it's going to be a slow outgoing tide. It's not happening tomorrow, not in my generation. Perhaps in your generation, you'll see a more significant shift.
What was the exact charges that J. Edgar Hoover put on your father?
Conspiracy to use the mail to defraud. Well, not only is it nothing, there was no evidence, because the only evidence that was at the trial was an empty envelope. And the envelope was presented as evidence by a witness who admitted that he was perjuring himself. And he had been coached to perjure by the prosecuting attorney, because he said that he worked for the UNIA, etc. And he couldn't tell, who gave him his paycheck, where he picked up the paycheck, and exactly, how long he worked there at the UNIA. So there was perjury all through the trial, and there was absolutely no evidence. And the judge confused both himself and the attorney, confused the jury, because the charge that supposedly my father was convicted on had been withdrawn and thrown out because of lack of evidence. So it was really quite a farce. Funny, I was in Washington yesterday, and somebody asked me that question, how do I feel when I pass on 9th Street and see his name? I said, I don't go there, But J. Edgar Hoover, in 1919, the Bureau of Investigation, as it was called, it was the prototype for the FBI, and he was in charge of it. And he had an internal memo back there in 1919. There's a Negro liberator up in Harlem. We've got to get him. So they were just looking for something. And it didn't matter what it was. They needed a charge to come up on. As a matter of fact, I think they're looking on a charge to, what is that thing, transporting somebody across state lines. But it was my wife, my mother, that they were trying to bring a charge against my father for carrying her across state lines. They didn't know that they were married. So that was the skullduggery that was going on. We were born, myself and my brother were born back in Jamaica.
Okay.
He went to prison in Atlanta in 1925 after his appeal was turned down. And the sentence was commuted by Calvin Coolidge in 27. But they wouldn't allow him 1 minute to even set the organization right or whatever. They just put him on a ship in New Orleans and sent him back to Jamaica. So he went back in 27 and started the organization again there, trying to hold the pieces of it together here in the United States. And we were born there in Jamaica. England in 1935. And we went over and joined him over there. So my early years were spent in England. And then we came back to Jamaica just before the war, when things were heating up. And the weather was not good for my brother, who had arthritis in his leg. So we came back to the warm climate. My father died in England in 1940, at the height of the war. And we were, quote, safely back in Jamaica. Well, first of all, go to justice numero 4 for Garvey.org. Justice4Garvey.org. It's the number 4, not FOUR, the number 4. But, this goes back a long ways. From 1983, the Prime Minister of Jamaica Eddie Seaga went to Reagan and asked him for a posthumous pardon or an exoneration. It didn't happen. In 1987, Congressman Conyers, he was head of the House Judiciary Committee, and he organized the committee down there. We went to D.C., and myself, my brother, John Henry Clark, Tony Martin, and a bunch of us, Judith Stein, to explain, the significance of Garvey and so on and so forth, and then to ask the judiciary, to move through the Congress that he would be exonerated. That didn't work. Congressman Rangel, ever since 2004, has had, resolutions, HCON resolution, this, that, and the other, asking for the exoneration of Marcus Garvey. So it's a process that has been going on for a long time, and it has not prevailed. Now, this is, in a sense, the last straw or the last legal avenue that we have, which is to get a posthumous pardon from the president. So that's why it's extremely important, with the window that we have. And we've initiated the pardon process, but we need 100,000 signatures by September the 28th. So we're asking everybody within hearing distance to go to justiceforgarvey.org, and there's a link to whitehouse.gov where the petition is, to go and sign and get as many people to sign as possible.
Yes. So what he's saying is some of the things that I've come across myself in my own experience of life. You see, us as a people, we have a thing called individualism that we need to work on. And we are also very selfish. We want everything. We don't want to see, it's like crab in a barrel. When one is climbing out, the other one is dragging him back, even though he himself can't get out. And the return of the return in home is something I've talked about here before, about return home to the motherland, to the continent of Africa. One day, this is a dream of mine that I personally would like it to come true ASAP. We've waited a long time. The 400 days is finished. I myself is almost 50. And you don't want to wait until you're sick and can't move and help yourself. Then that's when it is too late. I've seen many friends of mine and colleagues that put off and put it off and put off and put it off. And some just drop dead, and others deteriorate in health in such a way that they could not. It was too late. So I really don't want to leave it that long. So it's one of the dream of mine to return to the continent. And agents, there's agents among us that is disrupting our movements when we start moving. People who look like us and act like us, but don't mean well. What happened is some communities has been able to develop themselves and create businesses and prosper wherever they are, including the Chinese, Indian, and many more communities. But it's only us that is not allowed to build a community independently and create businesses that support each other and get our community support to support us as businesses and people. So these are some of the things we need to work on. And to also work on the goal of Marcus Garvey, I believe, is for us as a people to come together, and also the African nations, countries, to also unified and create a super power in the continent. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Until next time. To the thing, people are not subscribed. Please subscribe.